In the frozen chaos of World War II, when men weren't just fighting enemy bullets, but the brutal cold itself, one simple household item became an unlikely hero: soap. It wasn't just the Germans or the Soviets that soldiers feared. It was frostbite, the kind that turned skin black and made fingers fall away like burnt wood. Temperatures plummeted so low that rifles froze solid, boots became ice traps, and breath crystallized before hitting the air. On the Eastern Front, and during the Battle of the Bulge, frostbite killed and crippled tens of thousands. Both sides fought in conditions nature itself seemed to conspire against. Gloves stiffened like wood. Socks froze inside boots. Medical supplies ran thin, and even when ointments existed, they were quickly used up. In the desperation of survival, men started trying anything that might work, anything that could create even a whisper of warmth. That's when someone, somewhere, rubbed soap on their skin and realized it worked. It sounds crazy. Soap, the thing you'd least associate with warmth, became a frontline frost shield. But the trick was all about chemistry, not comfort. Old-fashioned soap back then wasn't the dry, squeaky clean kind we know today. It was fat-rich, made from animal tallow and lye, loaded with natural glycerin and fatty acids. When rubbed into the skin, it didn't just clean, it coated. Soldiers discovered that a thin layer of soap left behind a waxy film, something between a seal and a shield. That thin layer trapped the skin's natural oils, kept wind out, and slowed evaporative cooling, one of the fastest ways your body loses heat. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to hold off frostbite just long enough to matter. In a world where medical help might be days away, good enough was the difference between keeping a hand or losing it. Here's where it gets fascinating. Traditional soap from the 1940s was loaded with tallow, animal fat, and that made all the difference. When softened and rubbed on skin, those fats formed a thin, hydrophobic barrier that repelled moisture and reduced heat loss. Basically, the soap turned into a poor man's cold cream. Modern soaps and detergents strip oils from skin. They're designed to clean, not protect. But wartime soap had a greasy richness that did the opposite. Soldiers learned to use that grease to their advantage. They'd warm a small bar in their hands, rub it until it softened, and spread a whisper-thin layer across exposed areas, cheeks, nose, knuckles. Too thick and it cracked in the cold. Too thin and it failed. But when done right, it worked like a charm. What started as a whispered trench secret began spreading like wildfire. Word moved faster than any official order. British medics, American field doctors, and even Soviet troops started using soap or similar fats as a frost shield. By 1943, military field notes began casually mentioning the use of soap coatings to protect exposed skin. Some soldiers took it further, melting soap with candle wax to make a thicker paste, rubbing it into their gloves and boot seams for waterproofing. On the German side, mountain troops fighting in the Carpathians created their own version, grating soap and mixing it with wax over a flame to make a kind of primitive frost cream. Later, by the 1950s, the military took note. Arctic warfare manuals began recommending grease barriers, petroleum jelly, whale oil, and lanolin, officially recognizing what those soldiers had figured out on their own in the snow. But make no mistake, soap was the original battlefield hack. There's a lesson here that goes beyond history. In any survival situation, whether you're in a blizzard, lost in the mountains, or simply facing extreme cold, the same principle applies. Protect your skin's oils, seal out the wind, and slow heat loss. If you ever find yourself without fancy gear, an old-fashioned fat-based soap can still save you. Warm it with your hands, rub it lightly across exposed skin, and let it form a thin protective film. It's not high-tech, but it works. You can even use it on fabric. Rubbing soap into seams or gloves gives mild waterproofing, enough to help resist melting snow. Modern survival experts now understand that these soldiers were practicing basic thermoregulation, unknowingly combining chemistry and physiology in one gritty act of ingenuity. They weren't scientists. They were freezing men making miracles with what they had. There's something deeply human about this story. No orders, no manuals, no laboratories, just men against the elements, discovering that the simplest things, a bar of soap, a little warmth, a small idea, could save a life. It's a reminder that sometimes survival isn't about the best gear. It's about understanding. In today's age of synthetic everything, it's easy to forget that knowledge like this existed and worked. The men who fought in those frozen hellscapes were engineers of necessity, turning common sense into science through pure desperation. Their ingenuity reminds us that survival often depends less on what we have and more on what we know. The soap trick might seem like a small piece of trivia from a long-past war, but it's actually a window into something bigger: human adaptability. The same kind of thinking that turned bar soap into frost armor is what drives every great survival innovation today. History isn't just about battles won and lost. It's about how people endured, how they hacked the impossible, and how those lessons can still save us now. The soldiers who smeared soap on their skin weren't just fighting frostbite. They were proving that ingenuity beats hardship every time. Next time you're out in the cold, think of them. The soldiers who found salvation in a bar of soap. Their discovery wasn't glamorous, but it was genius. It wasn't planned, but it worked. And it's a story worth remembering. Because sometimes survival doesn't come from the equipment you carry. It comes from the understanding you hold that the simplest solutions can outsmart the harshest problems. If you found this story fascinating, don't let it end here. Subscribe to The Forgotten War Fronts, share this with your fellow history buffs, and keep exploring the hidden ingenuity that changed the course of human endurance. Because in history's smallest details, we often find its greatest lessons.